Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Love Your Journey podcast. I'm Tara Joe, and I have special guests with me today, which I'm very excited about. These two humans I have got to know mostly. Tracy is one of them. She has been somebody in my world for a long time as a client, a colleague, and a friend. And I'm excited to have her and her husband here today. They have written a book that I wanted to put out in the world to spread their message because they're very talented and skilled and have a great story just in general. So, Elizabeth Tracy Parent is an award winning educator, global speaker, and autism advocate with over 30 years of experience supporting children with neurodiverse needs and the families who love them and the educators who guide them. As a military spouse and mother of three, including two children on the autism spectrum, she brings both lived experience and professional expertise to her work, helping families and educators come together to navigate challenges and find a path forward. Tracy has developed and delivered trainings to support children with special needs at the national and international levels, including work in Russia focused on practical, effective strategies to support neurodiverse children. Jaime B. Parent is a retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel of the Biomedical Science Corps and a passionate advocate for military veterans and individuals with autism or other intellectual disabilities. He is a sought after speaker at veterans and disability events, as well as conferences in healthcare, cybersecurity, and artificial intelligence, including the College of Healthcare Information Executives. Parent also established the Enabled Vet program, a one of a kind internship that teaches disabled veterans entry level healthcare computer skills, which was featured on television and radio. Jaime and Tracy, who I'm so excited to have here today, are the co authors of The Mission at Home Navigating Assignments, TRICARE Education Benefits in Everyday Life with Your Child on the Spectrum. So, welcome, both of you. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for being here. This is the very first time I've met Jaime, but Tracy has been in my world for, I want to say, it feels like 7 years. I don't know if that's the number, but that's the number that pops into my mind. And I have lived experience, like, yes, I've helped you, but I have lived experience of you being able to help me when I was advocating for my brother who has Down syndrome. For those that are new listening to this, my brother had Down syndrome. He passed away almost 2 years ago in 2 days, 2 years ago already. And there was a lot that I was navigating with the challenges that he was displaying with behaviors. And I leaned into Tracy's expertise often because she just has this lived experience of working with so many children, but also having your own children at home. So I'm excited to learn a little bit more about you. And I think I just want to start really with why this book? Why did you decide to write this book in the first place? Either one of you can answer that, whichever one you feel. Yeah.
Well, Brian was born in 1988, and at the time there was very little known about autism. The things that we were trying to find out, you can now get with a click of the mouse.
Right.
But back then, if we needed any information, we had to write to libraries, research places, and wait 2 or 3 weeks to get a paperback. So we were kind of like feeling isolated and alone.
Yeah.
We found that a best resource for us was families, not necessarily military families, mind you, but families that were going through the same thing as we were. It didn't have to be the same age, could be an older child or an adult, but we found that that was the best resource. And since that time, and even up to this moment, families are still very important to us in building a community. So back when we were seeking answers way back 40 years ago, um,
Yeah.
we decided that our time is going to come someday when we need to give back to the community the way the community has given back to us. And so we decided to write this book together in order to share with military families and also others as to what our story is, and then offer some practical advice for families who are in the military or not in the military, but just lifelong advice as to how to raise a child in the military family with autism.
Yeah. I can't help but think about Brian. So, Brian, I've also had the pleasure of working with. in terms of the work that I do, and he's such a light in the darkness of the world. He's such a light, and he just brings me
Mhm.
so much joy every time I talk to him. And I'm just wondering, did you guys ever feel really alone in your navigating of what was going on? Like, did you know right away at what age did both of your kids start to show the signs? Like, do you want to go back that far? Does that feel comfortable for you to share?
100%. Um, I knew very early on. I was having thoughts of something was up at 6 months old. He wasn't playing with the mobile, and then
Yeah.
when you put him in those little things that they can run around in with the little
Yeah.
trays, and go all over, he would just kind of sit there. And then also he would not respond to his name, but if we had a candy wrapper on the second floor and opened it, boom, he'd be right up there for the candy. So I'm like, this is
Interesting.
odd behavior. And if we couldn't put our finger on exactly what it was. And when I would tell people, I would always get, oh, he's got an older brother. Oh, kids just don't talk right away. Oh, you have to, don't worry about it. But I was worried because I knew that something was up. Um, Jamie was very supportive, but he also said, Brian's normal till proven otherwise. And I was like, no, I want to find answers. So it was a lone feeling because I knew something was up. I didn't know where to go. People always made excuses for why Brian was acting that way. And a lot of people didn't know about autism. So we went to a professional when I was 18 months old, and she said, oh, he's not retarded and he's not this, but he might have some, so he's not globally there, but he probably might have pervasive developmental disorder or something. I'll see you later. And it was kind of shocking. There was no empathy there. And then we're supposed to walk out the door and prepare to go see other specialists. But there was no consideration for what the parents were going through. And then when I was going out talking to people about the diagnosis back then, people didn't know what that was. And if I said, he's autistic, they're like, oh, he's artistic? Like, what is he good at painting? I'm like,
My
no,
goodness.
autistic.
Yeah.
And it was kind of hard to define because they thought it was a disease, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Something you could cure, and it wasn't. So then I got a lot of abuse for people telling me that my child has terrible behavior and it's my fault. As the parent,
Right.
it's my fault, and why don't I rein him in? And so that was incredibly lonely. And you start to want to withdraw and like stay in your house and
Yeah.
just keep Ryan there. And then something came over me once we got to the parent groups, which was made it a lot less lonely. And they helped me say, you don't need to apologize for your child. Your child's here for a reason. But if I didn't have those parents,
Yeah.
I don't know what I would have done. It was very isolating, very depressing, to tell you
Yeah.
the truth. And you go through grief because now you've lost that perfect child. So your expectations of what it would be are gone. And without guidance, it was like, well, what can we expect? So once the parent groups came in, and once we had people who were experienced with autism, we both started to be able to relax. But yes, it was lonely and isolating at first. And I think it still is today for anybody who gets the
Yeah.
diagnosis.
Well, I think for sure, I'm thinking of one client right now. She was a mom in Toronto who had a 4 year old, and she carried a lot of shame. Um, she wouldn't even tell her friends. And I found that kind of mind blowing nowadays because I'm so in it, with having my brother. I just don't even think of anything other than just inclusion and sharing and being authentic, right? But I realized, like, due to their culture, there was probably something that she was trying to hide. And I think what I realized with the work with her is she just needed to know that her child was a blessing, because at that point she didn't know. And so I think if anybody's listening to this, I think that's one of the biggest things, is get yourself into a community that really does understand what you're going through, because then you realize you're not just one in a million, right? That your child, your family member, your loved one is actually a very lovable human, and a very, like, a blessing, really. I always say they're a blessing. And the other thing I see even with some of, I've had a lot of actually classmates that Corey went to school with who now have children with autism. And I think the biggest thing that I see them having gone through is yes, like just make your child behave, right? So people walking into the grocery store or at the park, they're just seeing what they think is a child misbehaving and right away think it's the parent not doing their job. So
Mhm.
how do you navigate a challenging thing like that? Like if you these parents that are listening right now, it's that's probably one of the most challenging things is the behavior, the mood. I don't know if you would call it a mood swing. What would you call it when they're going through that? Like how would you
They're
yeah.
not regulated. And
Yeah.
also, if they want something, they want something. The same scenario you're talking about, I still will never forget. Brian was in a store. He's only 2 years old. I'm trying to grocery store shop, and he grabs a bottle of Listerine mouthwash. Why, I don't know. And he starts running out the door. So
Oh
I
no.
have to run after him and grab him. And people are like, "Well, what's the matter with your son?" Um, and I said, well, he has autism, and they're like, you need to keep an eye on him, et cetera, et cetera. And I did catch him, and I did bring him back. So I brought that to the group and I said, what do we do about this? And one of the suggestions, which I think is a great one, is carry little cards. And it talks about what is autism. Well, thank you for your attention. This is what autism is. And it kind of explains it. And you say, so thank you. Have a great day. And thank you for understanding. So you can just hand that card to people. And what happens is there's a total change
Right.
and their approach. They realize that there's an issue, and that you're doing the best. And I think that it's got to be explaining, understanding, and advocating. Because when people don't know, they don't know. And
Yeah.
so I will tell you, it got tiring being a pioneer, because back then it was 1 in 4,000. Now it's 1 in 33, or 36. But
Yeah.
it's very common today, but back then it wasn't. So having that as a trick was very, very helpful so that you could take the emotion out of it and take the blame and the shame out of it and just say, here you go. And that could educate them and they can keep their opinions to themselves. And I
Yeah.
know Jamie had an interesting story about a woman with a fountain, the water fountain.
Oh yeah, we were on the New Jersey Turnpike, and we were back in the day standing in line for the water fountain.
Yeah.
And Brian just came up and cut in front of the line and got a drink, much
Yeah.
much to the chagrin of the rest of us. And this lady started yelling at him. And my initial gut response was, well, lady, the reason he's acting inappropriately is because he has autism. Now, why are you acting inappropriately? And then the look on her face went from anger to almost, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I later learned that that's not the best approach either, because
Wow.
I'm certainly not helping the situation. I'm reacting in the same way she kind of did,
Yeah.
and it was just another learning lesson for me that the best way to approach this thing is not to come back with tit for tat, mind you, but come back and educate the person and say something like, I'm so sorry, man. Please excuse us. Brian has autism. He doesn't realize he's cutting in line. Uh,
Yeah.
please, you might not know what autism is, but please excuse us for Brian cutting in line in front of everybody. And that way she's educated without getting an anger response from me.
Yeah.
And it might make her think the next time she sees somebody like Brian, cut in line or do whatever. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of building bricks and learning, not only that Brian has to do, but also his parents have to do as well.
Well, I think that's why I think you guys are such great parents because you are willing to learn. One of the biggest things to do is be self-aware, right? And to accept what is and then be open to possibility of educating and learning more and what else could happen if we let something else come in that we don't know, right? So many people have blinders on, as I call it. Why don't we do why don't we educate our listeners, because maybe there's somebody listening here that actually has not had the experience of somebody with autism yet. So either one of you just speak to that. How would you explain what autism is and how it can affect someone?
I'd like to say that autism is a neurological brain difference. And so the child perceives and feels and senses the world in a different way than a neurotypical child. Uh, and it's since it's on a spectrum, you can have, if say somebody with communication, you can have somebody that's totally nonverbal, all the way to a genius kind of person that still doesn't understand how to have a social conversation. And the biggest three areas that you will see in autism that all of anybody who has a diagnosis will get is going to be in the areas of communication, social interactions, and restricted behaviors. What that looks like for a younger or more complex child might be that they want to, play the same video over and over and over and over again, right? And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have the person that wants to talk about science, or they want to talk about the train, all right, or they want to talk about something like that. And instead of having a conversation, they're talking at you. But those repetitive things are ways that they can self-calm and self-regulate themselves
Right.
in a world that's incredibly confusing to them. Their senses are off, right? You see a lot of kids, so they have difficulty with emotional regulation. They can't communicate as well. They get frustrated and they have behavior. Most of the behavior comes from an inability to communicate their wants and needs. And so I think those are the biggest areas. So again, it's a triad of social communication, social interactions, and restricted behaviors. They'll also be affected in their physical body, kind of how they walk. A lot of kids walk on their toes, right? You might see that their hands are out a little bit differently. They might have fine motor problems, and their senses are off where they feel things intensely. So sounds will really bother them, and you'll see many wearing headphones, right?
Yeah.
Or they need a weighted blanket to calm their nervous system down. So that's how I like to explain it, that it's really just kind of a neurological difference. And because of that, I like to explain it's not a disease. It's
Yeah.
not something you can take a pill for, right?
Yeah.
But the symptoms can be managed and kids can get a whole lot better. But that doesn't mean that they're no longer autistic. They're autistic, but they can function and they can thrive given the right accommodations and supports.
Yeah, I really love that because I think it's always about, I think any child would thrive in the right environment, right? When we think about
Right.
that, same thing with any children with disabilities, when they're giving the opportunity to thrive, so many beautiful things can happen. And so I'm curious, because you're a military family, you're moving probably often, is that correct? And how many years were you in a station somewhere? And then did that affect your child or your children with autism? Like, was that, do you feel like that was more challenging based on, because
The
I can
normal
just
military,
imagine. Yeah.
the normal military family moves about every 3 years.
Wow.
And moving can be traumatic for any military family, especially
Yeah.
when kids are in high school. You're taking them away from friends or taking away from all their activities, going from high school to high school. And right now, I think my kids, if they decided to go to a high school reunion, would be confused as to which one to go to because
Right.
they've gone through so many.
Yeah.
What I was able to do was to work within the system to extend ourselves in places where things were going pretty well. So the two places that things were going well in were San Antonio, Texas, and Washington, D.C. We lived in Maryland, but I worked at Walter Reed Medical Center.
Okay.
The first 12 years, we moved a lot. We
Mhm.
moved to first tour in San Antonio. Then 3 years later, we moved to England. Then 3 years later, we moved to Riverside, California. And then 3 years later, we moved to San Antonio. So I realized that sameness and consistency was very important by that time.
Yeah.
And so I was able to get inner city transfers, if you will, because the United States Air Force has four military bases in San Antonio and the Army has one. So I was able to kind of maneuver myself around the Beltway, get different assignments within that 3 year period, but also there were assignments at different places. Because what the military doesn't like is what they call homesteading. And that's when you've been in a place too long, and I'm sorry, but now you have to move because you're homesteading. So I was able to avoid that for 6 years, and then an assignment came up at Walter Reed when I had almost 14 years in now, and we reached out to families. Where's the best place to live? What to do? It was kind of a toss up between the middle of Maryland, Howard County, and Arlington, Virginia, Northern Virginia. But when we got in touch with people involved with the Howard County Autism Society, we realized that was a better fit for the family and also a decent drive for myself. So I was able to manage 6 more years at Walter Reed. I was a bit of an anomaly heading up the healthcare program there. And so I was able to stay 6 years, and the military wanted to move us again. And we said, nah, I don't think so. But by that time, I had enough years in, if you will, that I could retire at 20 years and still
Oh,
receive benefits and pensions, etc. So that's why I tell people I retired at 20 years and 3 days because you have to retire at the end of the month. So yes, I served
oh,
20
yeah.
years in 3 days, and I was successfully able to, I won't say take it advantage of, but maneuver the system so that it worked both for the military, and for our family. And those are some of the tips of the trade that I put in the book. How people reading that can also work with assignments people, work with schools and military bases before they leave, and then make sure that the care is there before they make that move. And so that's how I was able to do it. And I articulated in a book how readers in the military could also have a similar path for a
Yeah.
20-year career like I did.
And
Well, we
I
make it,
focus
yeah.
more, I'm sorry, I focus
No,
more
that's
on the
great.
education part and the therapy part and how do you do that? And so what we would always do is look for the locations where we would move around the area because one thing we learned, if we get the resources for Brian, the rest of the family can adjust, but it can't be the opposite way around. So we would look, we go to the parent families. Now the military does have a spouse page. And it also does have what's called EFMP, which is Extended Family Member Program. And you can go there and say, we're coming, we have this IEP, what are the best schools? Do you have therapists? And then talk to the parents and find out where is the best place to move? Where are the best services? When we go in, we already have knowledge. And that's why we did choose Howard County, and they have an amazing Autism Society group. It's amazing. And we've joined that immediately, and they helped us with all those things. So I would encourage anybody that's going through this, do your homework, be prepared, and before you go, look at what's available and make those plans.
Yeah, I think you both make a good point. What's really pulling my attention here is this planning for the future, right? Planning for the future. And I saw this breakdown happen in our family just in terms of there was no plan for Corey's future as as somebody that might need extended care or complex medical needs or all of these things. I think our family, I don't know if it was my sister and I, but definitely my parents leaned into trusting the system. And we realized we couldn't trust the system. There is such a complete breakdown and there isn't enough funding. It's actually mind blowing to me how they're treated. So I think you make a good point. Is there places in the book that can help people navigate planning all the way as the kids get older? What is your suggestions with that?
Well, the thing is when your service ends, whether it's 20 years or 3 years or whatever, autism remains.
Yeah.
And so no matter how long you're going to stay in the military, you do need to be planning for the future. And I would say short term, medium term, and long term. Because a lot of families are stuck in the day-to-day crisis mode, if you will,
Yes.
it's hard to plan when operationally all the everything is falling around you. Makes it
Yep.
very, very difficult. So in the book, we described kind of the necessary pieces for, I would say, reasonable short-term, mid-term, and long-term planning. And that would include even starting to think about where are we going to go when all this service is over, and how are we going to get there, and what do we need to know? So the book goes into a lot of detail about things that are not even with the military, such as creating a special needs trust, a long-term financial plan, short-term and whole life insurance, perhaps. Um, what about other local, state, and federal benefits are there? What are you going to do when you're 60 years old, when you're 70 years old, when you're 80 years old, and you still have an autism family member? So a lot of the book goes into great detail of how to prepare for the rest of your life, no matter where you are. And also keep in mind that things keep changing, and you may have to throw out the book on this one, and then, oh, let's go here, let's do this, let's do that. You have to be flexible, you have to be agile, and you have to know about things outside of the military. And a lot of that is just the financial planning and the things that you need to do to make sure that not only your child with autism is getting served, but also any siblings involved, because they're in this too. And it can't just be all about the autism family. Well, we're going to Pine Ridge, Oklahoma, because that's where the best services are, but there's terrible high schools or whatever. So it has to be done
Right.
from a holistic approach so that everybody in the family feels comfortable as to where you're going now and to where you're going to be going into in the future.
You know, you bring up a really good point about how when there is siblings involved, how when there's so much attention, because there's
Mhm.
just so much attention on the sibling that needs the care.
Mhm.
Like definitely we had a lot of attention on Corey, who was also diabetic, right? And I
Mhm.
loved I wouldn't take anything back. Loved it every minute of it. But definitely I think there's how would you recommend from your own lived experience of navigating the challenges of the attention that is needed for obvious reasons, safety reasons being number one, right? Making sure they're safe, but just so that your other kids don't feel like they're being left
Mhm.
behind. How do you navigate that? What is your suggestions?
We really worked on that. I will tell you, many nights I sat up and I said to Jamie, I don't want our other kids feeling like Brian's a burden. I want them to be able to have their life too, and I want to make sure that we are encouraging them in the things that they love.
Yeah.
And so it was funny because one of the reactions from one of our neighbors was, I thought you were single because Jamie had one car, was taking one kid one way, and I was taking the other kid the other way. And we're just going back and forth in the driveway to ensure that our other kids were getting what they needed. I think also going to therapy is very important. I think that kids need to express their feelings about it. I think sibling groups are really good. I think that once they get those, just like parents go through grief and go through loss, so do the kids. So I think that doing those kinds of things are important, making sure that you're highlighting what their gifts are and making sure that they are involved in the areas that they want to be involved in too. I think that's extremely important in a family dynamic so that they're not thinking, and we never said, well, I'm sorry, you guys aren't focusing on Brian enough. We also tried to make sure that we did fun things that everybody liked. And then we make accommodations for Brian to join that. So he was not always dictating everything that we did. So I think those are very important that you make sure that you are highlighting your other children, that you're giving them time. We'd have a daddy-daughter day, and Jamie would take out Christia. He also had Daddy Sunday. Would take Brendan out to like the WWE and did fun things like that. I would take the kids out. So we have one-on-one time. So they felt like they were special within our family. So they did not feel that Brian impinged on their lives. You know, all siblings impinge on each other to some degree, right? But they didn't
Wow.
feel like it was an extreme, our lives have been taken over because of Brian. So those would be my suggestions for what to do.
And since autism is from birth, it's a little different than other things that might happen to families later on. So, for example, a 12-year-old who breaks their neck in a swimming pool and is now disabled. So
Right.
you have the family going before that age and then after that age, where the person is completely different. Brian is on a path that's all its own, but it started very early.
Yeah.
And so when it starts very early like that, he just kind of blends into the family
Yeah.
with his disability.
Yeah.
But the important thing that Tracy touched on a bit is also listening to those siblings. And while you're learning from your family member with autism, you're also learning from those siblings as to
Mhm.
how they are digesting all of this, if you will, and how are they coping or how are they living basically with a brother on the spectrum. And you get these sentinel moments that really surprise you and really kind of knock you for a loop. So, for example, we were in Texas one time in the car in a blinding rainstorm. And Brian has had to have pizza every Friday night for like the past 38 years. No matter where we are in the world, no matter what we're doing, when Friday comes along, we need to have pizza.
Yeah.
Well, we had to pull over to the side of the road because of this driving rainstorm, and Brian doesn't understand that. So he's in the back seat screaming and yelling, pizza, pizza, pizza. And I'm exasperated not only by driving safely, but pulling over
Yeah.
and then figuring out, all right, what am I going to do now? And
Yeah.
so while I'm there, head on the steering wheel, yeah, I wish Brian wasn't autistic. And I think Brendan, his older brother, was like 5 or 6 or whatever. He looks at me and he goes, "Why would you ever say something like that?" And I get a little angry. And I'm like, Brian, I'm like, hey, well, can't you hear your brother in the back screaming and yelling and all of this stuff? Why on earth would you ever say you're glad that your brother is autistic? And he says, well, if he wasn't autistic, he wouldn't be Brian.
Aw.
All right. So there's a little lesson, another water fountain lesson for me is that he doesn't know Brian any other way. This is who his brother is, and this is who he is growing up with. And of course, this is how he is accepted by Brendan. And what's wrong with you, Dad? And I'm like, stopped raining now. Let's go get the pizza.
So I'm crying over here if you didn't notice. So those that are just listening, that just really, yeah, there's just such a blessing. Really, I just wish more people would feel that. So that's so beautiful. I love that.
Well, I think of Corey because I know Corey. And I think of Brian is a lot to me like Corey. If people out there don't know who Corey was, what a character. He was something that
Yeah.
he was such a character. And you know what? Yes, there's challenging times, but the amount of times that Brian or Corey would make you laugh is just beyond. The way that they're thinking about things, it makes you stop. And you have to be in the present moment. You have
Yeah.
to be in the present moment. They pull you there because that's where they are. They're not thinking
Yeah.
about the future. They might be thinking a little bit about the past, but they're in the moment. And so they make you be in the moment. And I think that being present is really an important thing. But
Well,
I do feel that they're blessings.
yeah, when I won't go into details of what Brian and I have worked on in our sessions, but I often lead him through somatic work, like almost like a meditation, and like I would say he's probably my favorite client I've ever worked with because it's so fascinating what he comes up with that he sees, and like it blows my mind every single time, and it's the easiest work I've ever done is working with him. Like it's just so easeful for him, and whether or not that gets carried over into other days after, I don't know, but there's definitely something so magical about that. Like you're right, being in that present moment. Because one of the things I was going to ask you when you were talking about that is, what is the thing that having a child with autism has taught you? What is the biggest blessing in all of this, do you think, that you have been gifted?
I will tell you that I think that before Brian, you see the service, you see the competition between everybody, let's get ahead and uh, and you're comparing yourself to, your peers. Um, and it's this rat racy kind of thing. The thing that Brian taught us was compassion. We all of a sudden looked around after we saw Brian and saw all these other people that were struggling that we either ignored or weren't in our hemisphere. Um, and Brian taught us that. The other thing that I always say is Brian taught us simple joys. It took him a lot longer to talk. It was like 4 years old. And so then when he came out with words, we were overjoyed.
I bet.
So
Yeah.
we're like, oh my gosh. And we would really celebrate these things. And so it taught us to take day by day. And it also taught us that you have to celebrate the small wins. You have to look for those small wins every single day because they're there when you look at that. And you forget about the competition. And also, there's many people out there that are struggling. It might not be with autism, might not be Down syndrome, but there's other ways. And I think it changed our view to a much more compassionate view, and I think much more service-based. Um, and I love that of Brian. And the biggest thing about Brian is his BS meter. We could have Brian around and we kind of measure people,
Yeah.
as we look at how they respond to Brian. And if they decide to interact with Brian and they talk real, we can tell that they're authentic. And a lot of people are not authentic. And so we just go, well, great, have a nice day and pass along, go on to the next person. We see who has a heart. And that's the
Yeah.
biggest thing. It's not about in the head, it's about right here in the heart. And Brian brings people to us who have that great heart.
And we also learned not to sweat the unimportant things that are normally thought of as being important. The skinned knee, the fall, the broken finger, uh, the fact that he's not out there scoring the winning goal in the game, uh, and he's probably not going to go to USC, and he's probably not going to be in the Rose Bowl, and he's probably not going to, be a college athlete or professional athlete, but he might be able to flip a burger,
Yeah.
and he might be able to stock a package, or he might be able to put a grocery in a bag. And so you celebrate, those are his touchdown moments. Those are our
Yeah.
touchdown moments. When we celebrate the things which are high bar things for him,
Yes.
just like going and getting a college scholarship is a high bar things for other families, we take joy in watching him at Publix greet customers, put
Yeah.
stuff in the bags, take it out in the cart to the parking lot, and we enjoy not only his accomplishment, but his impact on other people as they see this, not so much a young man anymore, but they see this guy who they say he's got some challenges, and look how well he's doing overcoming those challenges. Brian brings out the best in people, and that's what we've learned. He brings out the best in people, and many times he brings out the best in us too.
Well, he is so proud of his job. Like he
Mhm.
really is so proud of his job and he really wants to lean into doing his best. That's what really struck me about him. And I think about how many, humans out there complain about their job or complain about their life. And here is this beautiful soul that's just trying to make a difference at this workplace and in doing something that might look simple for us to stock groceries, but for him it's like his biggest, it's almost, I don't know if it's his biggest achievement, but he talks about it so proudly when he does talk about it. And it's actually really heartwarming to see that, just how proud he is to have a job. And I think about that, I think about, when we're thinking about inclusion. So if anybody's listening and has a company, like this is how we could help people thrive in this world is giving them the opportunity of something. Corey worked in this facility in Saskatoon that had many different departments in it, but it wasn't like something he wanted to do. He wanted to work at a grocery store, but no grocery store in Saskatoon would accept him because he needed to have an aide, right? Like he needed to have somebody with him. And he would have thrived a lot better, I think, if he was in the public with everyone, with the energy and the buzz that Corey liked to be in, right? He liked to be at a movie theater. It would have been he would have thrived at being a movie theater. Of course, he'd probably sneak in to watch the movies, but I just think about all the opportunities that were so missed because people were not aware of, just even thinking outside the box. How could we make this possible, right? Instead of saying, I can't do that, but well, why not? Why couldn't you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of places are afraid and they don't understand, but that's why it's sad when they don't let the aid come in and help Corey. I think what would happen is after a while they'd be able to fade themselves back because he would learn it and he would like it. What we have learned is that when you hire people with disabilities, first of all, they're not trying to think about, well, what's the next job? I'm just using this as a stepping stone. Uh, you
Right.
know, who cares about this place? I'm just in it for the money and for me. That's not what is happening. Our kids are like, this is great. I can work here and I'm going to do the best at the job that I'm at. It doesn't mean we don't want kids to move up if they can. I'm not saying that. But many times they're the most loyal employees. They get up and show up. They don't take it for granted and take extra time off. They work hard at what they want to do. They have pride in the company. So they bring joy. I think that, and what I've seen is the public responds positively. That's what I've seen with most people. There's always going to be those outliers, right? But for the
Yeah.
majority, they do well. And what companies here, a lot of companies have learned is that their productivity increases with the people with disabilities
Oh,
because
yeah.
they want to do such a good job. They are grateful for the opportunity, and many of those people will stay where they are. And so you have more success. You don't have to rehire especially grocery stores. We see a lot of people,
Yeah.
they're hiring every 6 months because somebody came in, they used it for the summer and they're out. And so I think that companies are missing an opportunity to not hire people with disabilities because they make extremely good employees, given some accommodations and modifications.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about two places here in Calgary that there's a coffee shop where it's called Little E Cafe. It's downtown, and the individuals that work there all have disabilities. And when I this woman with Down syndrome made my mocha, she made it with such attention and such detail and such love that it was probably the best drink I've ever had because the intention she put of like making the heart on it, how they make it with the latte
Mhm.
stuff. And then I was at Earl's the other day in the Southwest, and there an individual with Down syndrome was placing the tables with the forks and again just so much love in it and so much. I got to make sure it's perfect. And you can see just, where somebody else is just like flipping this stuff and getting onto the next table and getting onto the next table and doing the next thing, right? Because they're going to rush, they're going to rush, they're going to rush. And it is such a teaching moment of how present they are.
Mhm.
Like, they're not thinking about all the thoughts that we think that are constantly in our head, spiraling 80,000 thoughts a day. They're really, I
Mhm.
mean, they might still, but they're really when they're doing these things that they're so proud of, it's really incredible to see that. And I just really lean into like I hope that there's more of that to come. I hope that there's more inclusion and more ability for people to see just what else is possible when we do let them
Mhm.
be,
And Jamie tells a great story about how with veterans and disabled veterans. And do you want to tell the story about how they change the other people?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's not just the veterans, but found out even with Brian working at the grocery store now, As a supervisor or manager, if you do hire someone with a disability, you kind of think, well, I'm really helping people with disabilities. I'm really advocating for those, and blah 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 and blah blah blah. And in fact, you are. What people don't realize is that when you bring somebody different into your environment, it changes the environment. So with someone like Brian, you may think, yeah, we're going to get a tax break and we're going to do all this, but quickly you realize that Brian is having an effect on the other employees. His upbeatness, his smile, his friendliness just brings out the best in people. Now, certainly there's going to be, grouchy people or whatever that are never going to be able to get it, if you will.
Yeah.
But for the most of us, Brian has that ability to tap into the human emotion. And you realize as you're changing Brian and helping him get a better job or whatever, he's really changing you. And he's making your workplace a more accepting, a more they see Brian struggling or they see Brian doing what his work, and it's like there's a connection there. There's a compassion there that you don't get just hiring anybody to do bagging or taking groceries out to the parking lot. So you're really helping your own self, not just from a tax perspective, but also from a employment engagement perspective. Because Brian can't see that you're having a bad day or you're grumpy or whatever. He can't see that. He's the same. I can't tell whether he's happier going to work or coming home from work. He just brings that to the workplace and getting him to come out of the workplace, he's got to do the walk around. Goodbye, Shirley. Goodbye, Kathy.
Yeah.
Goodbye, Fred. Goodbye, Brian. Goodbye, Brian. So nobody does that
No.
except Brian. And
Yes.
so that's
Yeah.
where you get this cohesiveness and
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
reaching out. And that's so important for employee morale in a workplace like that.
Yeah.
To see Brian excel like that brings pride in the personal employee and the employer itself that,
Yeah.
this type of thing is really, really good. And can we hire another guy like this?
And I want to talk like and include Corey. Those are the things that you just brought up that we have to remember. It's not about just shoving them into a place. You really need to look at what they are passionate about. So that's why it was too bad because Corey would be great in a grocery store or in a movie theater. And I'm telling you, people would have gotten a huge kick out of Corey. I did.
Of course.
And so
Yeah.
I think, you know what I mean? So you get the added benefit of going to the show and also having this interaction. And so I think that if you lead with what kids like, that's where we're going to really see them shine. Because I know some people are probably listening going, well, my child's more severe and my child's so into their thing. I always like to look at, even when I was an educator, what are their passions? What do they love? I would use that in teaching. So if they love Spider-Man, well, guess what? You're going to be counting Spider-Man. How many webs did he do? And if you take away this many webs, how many webs are there? It's all about looking at that, looking at what motivates them and putting them into those places that make them spark and come alive. That's what we all do.
Yeah.
So I think that it's okay to tap into that. And many children with autism have fascinations. They have those repetitive behaviors. And, so we have a cousin whose son loves trains. That's a common one. And he works at this place, Edenville, up in Massachusetts. And it's all about trains. And he'll post on Facebook, and he is just smiling and just like, I love this place. I hope it never closes. And he does it for the season and then it's closed during the winter. So I
Oh.
think that's also vitally important, tapping into their passions and their strengths.
Well, one of my biggest techniques in coaching is to lean into curiosity. So I think if people were to just lean into curiosity about what could they learn from these individuals, what are they teaching us, and then things would really open up in this world if we could lean into that a little bit more. Who is this book for? before we end, who is this book for? Is it just for military families, or do you think this is a potential to open up the space for others to learn more?
It's designed for military families with autism, which is the path that we were on. But
Yeah.
it's also very useful for military families with other types of disabilities, where you have to manage the healthcare, the schools, etc., for that disability as well. But it's also a book that can go outside of the military because a lot of the things that we put in the book are practical pieces for folks to learn, whether they're in the military or not, especially after when military service ends, the seeking of benefits, qualifications for what we have in the States here, Medicare or Medicaid or Social Security disability insurance. Those things are going to be useful to any family that has a disability family member, not just the military family. So the book can be for any of those folks that have to do the same type of financial planning, the same type of thinking, short-term, medium-term, and long-term thinking to help their child grow and be the best that they can be.
I also think that the stories are really interesting. It goes back to when there wasn't that many resources. It kind of goes back to Bernard Brimlin and also Ivar Lorbas, where the whole beginning of what was going on started. So it's kind of interesting for the history, but also what are the better interventions? That's going to be across the board. What happens is people especially get online and you can get sold on, oh, here, there are these supplements, and they're just, your child's not going to be autistic after this. And, we got those supplements, and Brian has really great hair, skin, and nails, but he
Mhm.
still has autism. And so we're trying to guide people away from, you can try those things, but we don't want you to spend a whole lot of money or put a whole lot of energy into the things that are not proven. And so the book does outline the kind of more common um, interventions and therapies that have been evidence-based and proven to help kids with autism so people can learn that. I also think this book would be good for schools or for businesses who
Mm.
receive families that are transient, that come in for a couple of years and go, because then they can understand what is this family going through? How can I support them? So they also can get prepared and understand that mindset. So I think that it really can transition across a couple of different fields.
Thank you so much for being here, both of you. It's been such an incredible journey to listen to your story. I can't wait to read it when it finally gets to me. It's lost somewhere in the mail, apparently, but it'll come to me, I know, in the divine timing, I'm sure. And I'll leave in the show notes how they can get a hold of you and where they can buy your book. So if anybody is listening, it'll be right in your app where you can click and learn more. Is there anything else you feel like you want to leave us with today that you haven't mentioned?
I would just like to say, lean into other people, lean into families, get a support group. You're not alone, although it feels like it. Our kids, to me, they're spiritually a reason that they're in your lives. There's a lot of lessons to learn. And although the journey can be challenging, it's also incredibly rewarding with what you learn and how you grow.
And there's somebody in there. There is somebody in there. You just have to work a little bit harder to get it out.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Be kind. Lots of love.